What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back on the video. A lot of injuries out there, so I'm sure many of you are scrambling to get some trades done. I had a league last week with 8 people either out or on IR. It was only week 2, so I feel your pain. I'm in the same boat. I do think, though, it was a pretty good week. There are some strong options for us to trade for, so let's hop into those. At wide receiver, top option in my eyes is the exact same as last week, and that is Chris Olave. Saints have scored 45.5 points per game, yet he only has 5 receptions for 92 yards, has not yet scored, and that's combined across 2 games. The underlying stats are fantastic, though. He's third among all wide receivers in average separation score. He's second in win rate. The problem has really just been volume, since they've been decimating both of the teams they've played. He only ran 22 routes in week 1, 15 routes last week. That's like unheard of. We never thought going into the season that our problem with Saints wide receivers was that they would be destroying anyone that they played. But 4 receptions for 81 yards on 15 routes is really, really strong. You bump that up just a little bit to a normal game, and he's having a really nice game. 94 different players have run more routes than Chris Olave, but I can promise you, when they stop scoring 40 plus every week, when they finally have a competitive game, when they're finally trailing again, not something we thought we'd be saying with the Saints, when that happens, though, Olave is going to drop a nuke. Once he does that, people are going to be like, oh yeah, the offense is way better, and he's their best pass catcher. Yeah, we probably shouldn't have been low on him. Clear number 1 buy in my eyes. I'd also look at Keenan Allen. A lot riskier, and we don't usually like to trade for players who are injured because there's a pretty wide range of outcomes. They can just miss more time than expected. They can suffer setbacks. So this is one I would only do if maybe you've gotten lucky. You haven't really been hit with the injury bug. I know that's probably uncommon this season, but if that's happened and you do want to take on a little bit of risk, especially, what if someone was a little bit thin at wide receiver, they drafted Keenan Allen, they're like, I need production now, maybe you can buy low on him. Because when he does come back, massive first read target share in week 1, 35%, strong separation score. So he was separating, he was playing well. He was the first read on more than a third of their plays. And the offensive line is really struggling. That's going to, I don't want to say benefit Keenan Allen, because you'd still prefer that the offensive line was playing well. But if anyone were to benefit, it's not the guys that get open deep downfield. It's the ones that get open shallow. If the offensive line is just crumbling, Caleb Williams is going to have to look for his outlet. That's going to be Keenan Allen. That's why he sees a huge first read target share as well. You're just going to need him back as a safety blanket for Williams. Long term, I do think Odunze is going to eat into the production of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, but the Bears need Keenan Allen back right now. When he does return, I do expect him to command a very strong target share, be a lot more efficient than he was in week 1. Caleb Williams did not look good in week 1. He looked a lot better in week 2. I think that's just going to be a trend with Caleb Williams. He's a great prospect, great player. I think he's just going to get better as the season progresses. And so as Caleb Williams develops, as Keenan Allen gets healthy, I think the offense is just going to look a lot better as a whole. And right now, I feel like it's just kind of time to buy low on the Bears. If you don't want to do that, you want to go after Odunze, who's done basically nothing through 2 games, but who we know is a great talent, go after him. If you want a cheaper running back, going after DeAndre Swift. Listen, again, the offensive line has been terrible. The offense itself has not scored very much, but Swift is not being 100% featured, but he's one of the most featured running backs in the NFL right now. If they run into some high volume games, some games where they're really getting going on offense, they're scoring touchdowns, he's going to have a really, really good week. So I think the Bears in general here are a buy low. I don't know that I'd buy low in Caleb Williams, because you do have other options at quarterback that we'll get to at the end of this video. But Keenan Allen, Odunze, DeAndre Swift, I would go after those players. Our last wide receiver to trade for is Garrett Wilson. Currently ranks 9th among all players in first read percentage, 11th in average separation score, 14th in win rate. The Jets looked better in week 2. That was a positive. That makes sense. They weren't playing the 49ers when the 49ers had time to prepare. But even with the offense looking better, Garrett Wilson still only had 4 receptions for 57 yards. This week, they take on the Patriots on Thursday night. Mixed kind of outlook here. So through 2 weeks, the Patriots rank as the 3rd toughest matchup for yards per carry. They've allowed the 2nd fewest rushing yards. Teams have kind of realized how strong they are against running backs, and so that's led to them facing the highest opponent pass play percentage. Now, we got to be careful with small samples. That's not just a guarantee to continue all season. We also know last season, Seattle didn't have Ken Walker. That probably played into why they want to throw the ball a little bit more. So it's not a guarantee that every team is going to lean super pass heavy against the Patriots. And then you also have the fact that they do have good cornerback play. Gonzalez is their best one, obviously. He's potentially going to shadow Garrett Wilson. We don't really know. When he was on DK Metcalf didn't do anything. But then in the plays where he wasn't guarding Metcalf goes off. And so there's still going to be plays where Garrett Wilson has worse coverage, can get open off of that. So I think there's a chance that this is kind of the blowout spot for him. Also, it's a short week. Typically on these short weeks, they don't have time to prepare. And so it's go out there and use your best guys. I do think this is a spot where we could see Aaron Rodgers really just lean on his best wide receiver, pepper Garrett Wilson with targets. And so I think it could be one of his good games. But even if it's not, even if he goes out there and has, a semi-mediocre one, I do still think rest of season, he's still a top 10 wide receiver, and I can guarantee you can get him cheaper for that on the trade market. As for running backs, top option in my eyes is Jahmyr Gibbs, 15 touches in week 1, 20 touches last week. Just hasn't scored yet. That's why the fantasy points aren't monstrous. He's going to have a blow-up game at some point, whether it's on the ground with touchdowns through the air, because he can excel in every area. That makes him safer, but also guarantees that he's got a much higher ceiling. It's also just well documented how many indoor games Detroit has this season, which we haven't really noticed yet because it's still like the end of summer. We still have pretty good weather around the country. Every single week, we're going to start to see more fall games, winter games, right? More rain, more wind, more snow. That's going to start happening to some of these outdoor games. And so, again, I'm not sure there's a single game, maybe like 1 or 2 games we've run into so far this season where weather's been any sort of concern. It's going to start happening. There's like 4, 5, 6 games every single week where we're actually looking at this and be like, okay, weather not ideal in that spot, not with the Lions. They have their first outdoor game at Green Bay in week 9. Then they don't go outdoors again until week 16. They're going to have so many indoor games. It's going to be every week that they're playing in a game that has a 50-point total and has a chance to go off. Gibbs also hasn't suffered a setback from his hamstring injury, so not 100% in the clear yet. Obviously, this is something that he could have a setback in like week 5, week 6, but enough time has passed. They've used him enough in these games where a setback feels pretty unlikely at this point, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's such a good spot in Detroit. We're going to talk about another Detroit player a little bit later on. Having these high upside indoor games is really, really going to benefit them. And again, we're going to see that benefit as we work our way through the season. I finished my first run of rest of season rankings yesterday. He came in as a running back 6. I think I'm going to move him up to the running back 4. He was just a hair behind the other 2. Great offense, great player, high floor, high ceiling. If you can trade for him, do it. I'd also go after Kyren Williams. He's been the second most featured running back through the NFL through 2 weeks. But that's also counting the fact that he didn't really play in the fourth quarter last week because the game got out of hand and they went away from him. So if you don't count that, he's been the most featured running back in the NFL. He was a league winner last year. Now, part of that was because you got him for free. But even had you drafted Kyren in the 3rd round last season, for how productive he was last year, he still would have ended up being a league winner. Maybe not to the degree that he was, but he would have been classified as a league winner. And through 2 weeks, he's being used exactly how he was last season. People will be hesitant just because, the Rams have so many injuries. And I get it, right? Puka, Kupp, both of them being out, the Rams are not going to be great. That's going to hurt Kyren Williams because they're just going to score less. But Kyren is now, by far their best offensive player, and they're going to have to overload him with touches. I know that they don't want to. They've come out and said we would prefer not to overload him. Well, they kind of have to at this point. They have receivers that they'll go to, and they're not going to not use their wide receiver room. But he's so clearly their best player that they're going to have to give him a ton of touches, and especially in the red zone. Even if they can somewhat limit him to the 20s, as soon as they make it into the red zone, he's going to get multiple chances to score every single time. And so the touchdown floor and ceiling is elevated. And plus, they're not going to be out the whole season, right? Puka's going to come back, and Kupp is going to come back, probably by the midpoint of the season. So the whole second half, you're going to have Kyren probably as a featured running back. At this point, it just seems like they're going to roll with him. Unless something happens, he'll be a featured running back. And so you get him in what he was last season for the second half of the season. And before that, maybe less efficient, but overloaded with touches. So he's going to be super, super valuable. That's obviously valuable in fantasy, getting this many touches. We usually don't have quarterback trade targets. It's so hard to trade for quarterbacks, and they can only be so bad in terms of point expectation or points below expectation. But Joe Burrow is a very, very strong trade candidate this week. Chase is going to blow up soon. Higgins is going to return. Joseph has really stepped it up this season. Burton clearly going to add ceiling to this offense when he's ready. And so the outlook of this Bengals passing offense is still really, really strong. And through 2 weeks, Burrow is third in expected fantasy points per game. He's just the second most unlucky quarterback behind someone we'll talk about in a second. I think all that changes this week. They get the dream matchup, the Commanders. Everyone wants to play the Commanders. That's the blow-up spot. Even if Higgins doesn't return, I think Chase blows up. If Higgins does return, I think this offense just explodes. But again, it's like better days are coming for the Bengals, irrespective of this specific matchup. We know Ja'Marr Chase is good. He just has to kind of get back into shape, get going. We know Higgins is going to elevate this offense. When he does return, he should return relatively soon. We know Joseph is a nice number 3 right now, but when Burton returns and he can kind of mix in with Joseph, that's going to elevate the potential of this offense as well. It's like everything is looking up. We know they're going to be good, and he's just not producing right now because he's getting a little bit unlucky with touchdowns in the offense in general. If you want a relatively cheap top 10 quarterback for the rest of the season, I'd go after Joe Burrow. I would also go after Jared Goff if you need a relatively cheap quarterback for a lot of the same reasons as Gibbs. Again, all these dome games are going to start to stick out more and more as we work our way through the season. But also, Jared Goff is currently the single most unlucky quarterback in the NFL by a mile. He is 4th right now in expected points per game, but 26th in actual points per game because he's only thrown for 1 touchdown. This is an elite offense. They're going to finish top 5 in scoring yet again. Goff, he was 5th in passing touchdowns in 2022, 4th in 2023. You know he's going to be like top 7 in passing touchdowns. The touchdowns are coming. And so if you need a cheaper quarterback to go after, if you need a streaming option, if someone dropped him, he's going to be good rest of season. Don't panic on Jared Goff. Then finally, 2 tight end options are Jake Ferguson and Travis Kelce. Ferguson hurt in week 1, seemed like it would be long-term. It is not going to be long-term. It seems like it's going to be much shorter term. Now, I don't know if he returns this week or next week, but another one like Keenan Allen, if you can afford to take on that risk, you've got at least an okay tight end and someone's just panicking, they need something, I'd be fine assuming that risk with Ferguson because we know he's got a strong role on Cowboys. We know the Cowboys are a good offense. We know tight end is a wasteland so far. Only 4 tight ends right now have 18 half PPR points or more through two weeks. Like 18 total half PPR points through 2 weeks. Only 4 tight ends have done that. The bar is very low right now for being an elite tight end. Ferguson, we know is going to be an elite red zone option. He was actually 2nd on the team in first read percentage in week 1. Again, we know with 100% certainty the role is there. There's a very strong chance he can finish as a top 5 tight end this season, just given the way things are trending with many of the others. And then with Kelce, the results, like the actual box score statistics, they've been terrible so far, but how often can you buy low on Travis Kelce in a year where tight ends are doing absolutely nothing? Also, he obviously got unlucky last season. He was tackled inside the 1-yard line. He had a 40-plus yard play called back due to holding. Like, you add those 2 plays in there, he's looking just fine through 2 weeks. Also, I think people are kind of looking at that and be like, oh no, it was true. He's not running any routes. No, he leads the Chiefs with 49 routes. He's got 3 more than Rashee Rice, 7 more than Xavier Worthy. You've got Pacheco injured right now, and so they're probably going to lean a little bit more pass heavy when they do get into the red zone, which will be often. We know that Patrick Mahomes underperforming right now. Just this offense in general just hasn't been as high of a ceiling as we know they're going to be long term. The Chiefs are going to have a 30, 34-point game. They're going to be a lot better, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, this is Kansas City. Obviously, we should have been buying low on any player that we can on the Chiefs. He's not going to go back to averaging, 14 points per game like he has in the past. Like, he's just got a little bit lower ceiling than we're kind of used to just because of his age, obviously. But he's probably going to be a top 3 tight end this season. If anyone wants to dump him, take advantage. So you can see more trade targets on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. You can also see my rest of season rankings and trade calculators there as well. I'll be back tomorrow with week 3 rankings, but that'll do it for this one. Leave a like if you watched this far. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here, but I'll catch you guys on the next one.